What's going on, guys? Pete Nova here with Player Profiler. Today, I have a two-round, 12-team Superflex rookie mock draft. We're just a few weeks away from the NFL draft, and what better than to do a rookie mock draft? I'm going to be selecting every single pick in today's draft, while also dropping a few nuggets here and there as to where I think some of these players may go. So let's get into it. So the first player off the board is going to be Ashton Genty, right? I mean, I think in years past, there was kind of some speculation as to who the 101 should be, but this year it feels pretty clear cut that Genty's going to be the 101 in most rookie drafts, and he's my 101 in this year's rookie mock draft, as well as just rookie rankings overall. Genty's coming off of a 30 touchdown season, 7 yards per carry, and he had a 43.7% college dominator rating, 163 forced missed tackles. That's the most in college football. And if I had to guess where I think he's going to go, it's likely going to be the Raiders with Pete Carroll, who we've seen has a history of drafting running backs pretty high. They did trade for Geno Smith, so I think quarterback is out of the question there, unless a surprise player like Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter somehow slip to them at their pick. I think Genty likely is going to be the selection there. Now, at the 102, Cam Ward is going to be the selection here. In Dynasty, especially in Superflex, we know quarterbacks hold the most value. And even if a quarterback in his rookie season has a down year, if he was a first round selection, especially the 101 in the NFL draft, there's a good chance he's still going to be able to be traded for, at worst, a late first rounder. Cam Ward has the rushing upside with his legs. He also provides a really strong arm. He can hit, throws all over the field at all three levels. And he's also pretty effective in the pocket for a mobile passer, which, a guy that's mobile like him, they usually look to run, but he oftentimes comes off as a guy who's looking to make the throw downfield as he's extending a play. And as I said, his legs are going to provide a pretty decent floor for fantasy. And at the 101, likely to the Titans, I think it could be a good fit, especially if they maybe bring in some extra weapons in this year's draft. So yeah, Cam Ward's going to be the 101 here for me. Now, at the 103, it's going to be Tet McMillan. I know this is kind of where the rubber starts to meet the road in rookie drafts, right? I mean, you have Omarion Hampton, you have Trevion Henderson. Some might even say Tet McMillan should go 102 over Cam Ward, but I have Ted here at the 103. He profiles like a prototypical X wide receiver at 6'4, 219 pounds. This is a guy who has elite contested catch ability with a massive radius to catch the football. He had a 32% college target share. Now, he didn't have a ton of competition, in college with elite weapons around him, but a 32% college target share at a solid size school is nothing to scoff at. And I'd love to see him in an offense with a guy like Bryce Young and Dave Canales if he does go top 10. It's really hard to not have a guy like Tet this high in your rankings on the board if he's going to get top 10 first round capital, especially if he can go to a team, like the Panthers, who I think is a possible landing spot for him with Dave Canales. We've seen Dave Canales and Bryce Young work together last year. It looks like Bryce Young looked a lot more comfortable in that offense. That offensive line gave him a lot of time. And I think Tech McMillan could thrive in this offense. And, it would be a really nice thing for Bryce Young to have a really strong wide receiver one. And I think Tech McMillan has likely immediate, wide receiver 15 to wide receiver 18 range immediately once he's drafted in Dynasty, with low end wide receiver one upside, maybe even middling wide receiver one upside in Dynasty. So at the 103, especially with the draft capital, I'm taking Tet McMillan here, and I think he's going to have a pretty solid NFL career. At the 104, it's going to be Omarion Hampton for me. My best player comp for Omarion Hampton reminds me of DeMarco Murray. The play style, they just run so similar. And this is a player coming off of back to back 1,500-yard seasons. He's a 6 foot, 221-pound running back who possesses the ability to be a three down guy. He's a downhill runner, has really soft hands as well, caught 67 receptions over the last two seasons. 4.46 40-yard dash is really elite for a guy his size. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's 6 foot, 221 pounds, and immediate top 10 dynasty running back with first round capital. I think there's a really solid chance he goes in the top 20. Maybe he goes to Denver, maybe he goes to Dallas and doesn't slip that far back. But this is a guy that it feels like he's pretty much locked into the first round. And with that kind of capital, getting that fifth year option, I think he's going to be a very solid contributor for fantasy dynasty rosters and a possible cornerstone piece for a young team looking to, get younger at the running back position. So I like him here at the 104. He's a really fun running back to scout and watch on film, and excited to see what he does in the league. The next player on this list at the 105 is going to be Trevion Henderson out of Ohio State, running mate of Quinshon Judkins. When you look at Trevion Henderson, you just think of like a home run hitter. The one thing that gets me really excited about him too is his pass blocking ability. He's by far, in my opinion, the best pass blocker in this class. And the reason I bring up pass pro is it's super important to have a running back who is capable of pass blocking. Many of these guys come out of college, they're super talented, but they struggle to get on the field because they lack the ability to protect in pass down situations. And it's also usually a pretty huge tell when they're on the field if they're not able to pass block, and that means they're usually running out for a route or getting the football on a run play. So when you look at Trevion Henderson, though, he's got explosive blend of like speed and also receiving skills. He's got a nice combination of both. He fits the modern NFL offense really well, and the one concern is the size and the injury history. It's one of those things where he has the ability to be a three down back, in my opinion, but I don't think he's going to be that. He's likely going to have a running mate with him in most situations wherever he lands, kind of like a David Montgomery, right? I'm not comparing him and saying he's Jahmyr Gibbs, but that's the kind of situation we're going to see where he's going to be fantasy valuable in a Jahmyr Gibbs type role, where maybe he goes to an offense like the Chicago Bears if he does go in round two and the Bears don't get Genty in round one, which I don't think is going to happen at this point. But he also had a 53.9 breakaway run rate. And as I said, he's got home run hitting ability. That right there, I mean, 53.9 breakaway run rate, more than half of his runs were breakaway runs. And so I really like Trevion Henderson. I think he's going to be a really solid asset in fantasy. He's a very good pass catcher as well. Quinshon Judkins was a better pass catcher than some gave him credit for, but because Trevion Henderson was so good at catching the football, he really took over that role ahead of Judkins. And so I think he fits the modern NFL system and mold really well for what a running back and what the NFL is looking for in a running back. And he's going to be my 105 off the board. At the 106, I'm going to go with Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State. So another Ohio State player off the board in back-to-back scenarios here. But at the 106, I mean, Egbuka just feels like such a safe option. He's coming off of two back-to-back seasons with 1,000 yards and 10 total touchdowns. And he's going to come in very pro ready. He provides a very high floor. This is a guy that's an elite route runner who has a great feel for leverage and zone coverage as well. And he's pretty tough after the catch and has pretty strong hands in contested spots. I think his floor to me is a mid wide receiver too, but he has wide receiver one upside in my opinion. And when we look at all these Ohio State wide receivers that have come out, of the NFL draft over the recent years, most, if not all of them, have pretty much hit. And everything Egbuka does is above average, which makes him a guy that you can expect to contribute on day one. I really like his skill set. Like I said, he's pluses all over the board, and like I said, above average, which makes him a guy that will likely be a contributor day one. So Mika Egbuka off the board at the 106. I love his profile, and I'm really excited to see what he's going to do in the NFL. Now, at the 107, I have to go with the Penn State tight end Tyler Warren. 6'6, 256 pounds, has the size to be an inline blocker, but the athleticism to be spread out in the slot or even go out wide. Heck, this guy could even probably line up in the backfield as a fullback if they wanted to, but a former high school quarterback. So when you think about a guy transitioning from being a high school quarterback, he can probably see the field very well, and it shows up in his game, right? He finds the soft spots in zone coverage. And for a tight end, that's really what you love to see. And that's what a guy like Travis Kelsey thrived in doing, is finding soft spots in the zone of a defense. Now, he had a 17 catch game against USC, which tied the FBS record. And with tight ends, guys like him don't come around often. He's going to be an instant top 8 tight end with top 15 draft capital in this year's draft. I don't see him falling past the 15th overall pick. And to me, I would love to see him go to the Carolina Panthers. I know we talked about Tet going there. I'd love to see the Carolina Panthers bring in Tyler Warren as well. I know they drafted at the position last year, but it's hard to pass up on a guy like Tyler Warren, and pairing him up with Bryce Young as being a security blanket and just adding another wrinkle into an offense that really needs a nice infusion of talent at the skill position. I think would be a really nice fit for Carolina and would be a good pairing for Tyler Warren. And so he's going to be my 107 off the board. Now, at the 108, we're going to go with Shador Sanders out of Colorado. We talked about it earlier on in the show, but quarterbacks hold so much value in Dynasty. And this is a guy who, unless something crazy happens in the NFL draft, he's going to get first round draft capital. And again, if Shador Sanders is not a guy that maybe hits hard in his first season, he's going to be movable. And if you're getting him at the 108, you're likely still going to be able to get pretty much what you paid for in year two if you decided to move him. But when we look at Shador Sanders, he's likely going to be the QB2 off the board, coming off of a season with 37 touchdowns. He's also a battle-tested player, right? Going from a JUCO school now to Colorado with all the media hype and pretty much all of the critics as well. He's a guy who has seemed to handle all of that pretty well. If he goes to a big market team, I'm not concerned that he's not going to be able to handle that pressure and that media well when he gets to the NFL. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Shador Sanders when it comes to a fantasy perspective because, look, he lacks mobility. He doesn't have a ton of upside with his legs, but he projects, in my opinion, to be a solid NFL starter that could be around for a decent amount of time, right? Kind of like a Geno Smith, where hopefully has a better start to his career, but a guy that can stick around as a, somewhere around like a QB 15 is likely where I see him kind of settling in at his peak. But maybe he could surprise us if he goes to a really good situation like Pittsburgh, who has two very, very good wide receivers. Now, the offensive line's a little bit shaky, but Shador Sanders, if he doesn't go in the top 10, which it seems like is a very strong possibility, could find himself with a very good football team in the later part of the draft, right? And so that could be a better situation for him. He's getting that first round capital, right? He's getting that fifth year option, because he's going to go in the first round. And I think the Saints would be a really good fit too, with Kellen Moore there. I think it would be an awesome fit for him, right? But I like Shador Sanders here, at the 108. I think you're getting good value on a quarterback that's going to be drafted in the first round. And so that's where we're going to take him. Now, at the 109, this is where things start to get a little bit interesting. I think this is going to be where you see a lot of different variants in your rookie drafts because some people are going to start having different evaluations for some of these players. And at the 109, we're going to go with Matthew Golden out of Texas. This is a guy who's really risen through the process. Some scouts like Daniel Jeremiah have touted him as the number one wide receiver in this class. And I mean, he ran a very fast 40 time, a 4.29 40. That's hard to, not put a lot of stock in, though we have seen some of these guys that run these really fast 40s without a ton of college production, right? That don't end up hitting when they make it to the NFL. But I'm confident in Matthew Golden. I'm fine taking him here at the 109. He's got big playability written all over him. And he appeared in the biggest moments in the biggest spots in his career. He delivered in big games with 150 plus yards in the SEC title game, as well as in the college football playoffs. And he's dangerous, yards after catch guy. I think he'd be a really good fit with Dallas as a good complement to CeeDee Lamb. If he does, in fact, go that high, we're talking about top 15 capital, unless he falls past Dallas at 12 and Dallas maybe trades back in to go get him. But I think he would complement a guy like CeeDee Lamb really well, who CeeDee Lamb's a good down the field player, but he also can work a lot in the slot where Matthew Golden could stress the defense deep. And when you look at Matthew Golden, he is, like I said, a guy that has big playability written all over him. He's starting to become a big riser in this process. A lot of people are starting to buy in on Matthew Golden. I'm not saying I'm not completely sold on him, but I think 109 is a pretty fair spot for him as opposed to where you'll see him go in other rookie dynasty mock drafts. So I got him here at 109. Now, at the 110, we're going to go with Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State. That's now the third Ohio State player off the board. And when you look at Quinshon Judkins, I wasn't super high on him, but when I saw him at the combine, he checked a lot of the boxes that I needed to see to feel comfortable having him as high as I do here, which is my running back for Quinshon Judkins. Ran a 4.48 40-yard dash at the combine at 6 foot, 221 pounds. That's really, really strong speed. And I'm not the biggest fan of the 40-yard dash and using it as a huge indicator for the running back position, but still hard to ignore. That's a really strong 40 time and a really fast 40 time for a guy at his size. SEC Freshman of the Year, didn't catch the ball nearly as much, but I don't think that's due to the fact that Judkins can't catch the ball at the NFL level. I just think he was paired up with Trevion Henderson, who was just such a good pass blocker as well as pass catcher, that there was no need to use Judkins nearly as much as a pass catcher at Ohio State. But this is a guy who reminds me of Najee Harris. He's a power running back, right? Very similar in that regard. That would be my comp, likely a mid-day 2 pick. And that's solid draft capital for a running back. I think a good spot for him would be the Cincinnati Bengals, who he's done a top 30 visit with. Be a good chance to spell Chase Brown. And Chase Brown, he's probably going to lose some opportunities because I do think the Bengals are going to bring in a running back in this draft. Like I said, he's my running back 4, and I really like Quinshon Judkins. I like what he did in college, but that combine really, really solidified my feelings and moved him up my list quite a bit. And he's going to be my running back 4 here at the 110. Now, moving on to the 111, we're going to go with the tight end out of Michigan. That's going to be Colston Loveland. Likely going to get first-round capital. I think that's pretty much a lock. Now, how high in the NFL draft he will go, that I'm not sure, right? There's a lot of people. Some people have him over Tyler Warren. I do think first round is inevitable for him, but how high will he go? Will he make it past 20? Will he make it past the Chargers and Harbaugh, who is a familiar face and was his ex-coach at Michigan? But when you look at Colston Loveland, a 27.9% target share, which led the Michigan offense. He had a breakout age of 19, which is a really good sign when you see a guy break out that young in their college career. Strong yards after catch ability, and to me is going to be a day 1 top 10 dynasty tight end. with that first round draft capital. If he doesn't somehow get first round draft capital and slips, I'm still going to have him likely bordering that top 10, ranking in Dynasty, inside that top 10, maybe top 10 to 12. But I mean, 6'6", 248, can be on the field in all situations and packages as a tight end. And I really like what I saw out of him, and I'm going to definitely take him here at the 111. Now, to close out the first round at the 112, this one's going to be maybe a little bit more spicier, but I'm going to go with Jackson Dart here. This is a guy who looks like he's also going to get first round capital. It seems very likely that Dart's going to go in the back end of the first round, and likely, like Shedeur Sanders, to a pretty solid football team if Sanders slips as well. I do think Dart has a chance to go to a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, or maybe the Saints trade back in, like we talked about with Shedeur Sanders. But when you look at Jackson Dart, right, he's an athletic quarterback who can make many big-time throws on the field. He was third in big-time throws in college football last year and second in just big-time throw rate. Solid floor with the rushing upside, rushed for 495 yards in 2024. And, when you talk about quarterbacks in Dynasty, I'll continue to say it, is when you get that first round capital, it's hard to ignore that and not take them in the first round. If you can get Jackson Dart possibly later than this, in the early to mid second round, I mean, that'd be an absolute steal. But I do think once he gets that first round capital, most mock drafts and regular rookie drafts are going to likely have him at the back end of the first to the turn in the early second round. But while we're talking about rookies here, I do want to go ahead and shout out our rookie guide here at Player Profiler.
Theo Greminger is gone. We wish him all the best, but he did leave for us a great gift, the 2025 Player Profiler Rookie Guide. That's right. It is here. It is beautiful. It will help you dominate your rookie drafts this year. It features 60-plus player breakdowns, written primarily by Theo Greminger himself, as well as our proprietary NFL draft grades and strategy and tactics for dominating your rookie draft this year. We have a composite rankings with Theo's rankings, Cody, John Lobb, Jagger May, and Jax Falcone. It's right there on Player Profiler. It's $20. You won't find a better draft kit. You certainly won't find a better draft kit value. So go get it on playerprofiler.com.
And there you have it. If you have not already, go check that out. The rookie guide has chock full of information. But here at the 201, we're going to go with Luther Burden out of Missouri. This is a guy who's likely going to, I think, fall outside of the first round and is going to get high day two capital. Look, this is a guy who had a down year in 2024, but was seen as the wide receiver 2 by many coming into the 2024 season when looking at this year's draft class. Had a strong sophomore season, 86 catches, 1,212 yards, and 9 touchdowns in 2023. You really like to see young breakouts, and I said that before, but breaking out in 2023 at his age, was impressive, right? Again, down year in 2024, but we know that the skill set is there. And this is an explosive, twitchy player who, if he goes to the right offense, can definitely thrive in PPR, especially if he goes to an offense with an offensive coordinator who will manufacture touches for him. I don't think he has to be this gadgety guy in order for him to be successful at the next level. And he ran a 4.41 40-yard dash. A team that I'd like to see him go to would be the Miami Dolphins. There's a lot of talk about Tyreek Hill possibly being traded. There's a lot of news coming out of Miami. Who the heck knows what's going to go on over there? But in this kind of offense, with his play style and what they like to do, I think he'd be a perfect fit. And that's why I have him here at the 201. At the 202, we're going to go with another running back, Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. He's a guy who likely is going to get second round capital. He ran a 4.57 40-yard dash, and that was pretty disappointing for a lot of people. But I mentioned it before, and with running backs, you're not going to really see many that are just going straight line speed. It is impressive to see some of these guys run really fast times, but I'm not super concerned for Caleb Johnson when you consider his size, right? He's 6'1", 220 pounds. So running a 4.57 is not super concerning to me. But He's going to be a guy that's likely going to require decent volume in fantasy football, right? He's not a great pass catcher, or at least we think. He comes from an offense that doesn't really throw the football very much to the running back, and he had 22 catches in 2024. But again, this is in an Iowa offense that really didn't throw the football a ton. And when they did, it wasn't really going much to the running back position. And we've seen that historically over the last few years. But when you look at Caleb Johnson, number one in breakaway run rate in 2024, he fits into a zone scheme, which is a lot of NFL offenses right now. Many are running zone schemes. So that's definitely a plus for him. When I look at him, I think of RB2 to maybe a high RB2 upside is where I see him. I don't think he's going to be an RB1, but I think he's going to be a solid fantasy contributor, or can be a solid fantasy contributor, and likely RB2 to a high RB2 is likely where I can see him being valued and finishing in years to come once he hits the NFL level. At the 203, look, this is a guy that many people, if you are watching this, probably are wondering, when is Travis Hunter going to get selected? I do want to put the caveat in there that for me, if I'm drafting my rookie draft prior to the actual NFL draft, or at least prior to gathering more information, post NFL draft, I'm not really comfortable drafting Travis Hunter in the first round or very high in the first round either, until I know that this guy's going to play wide receiver, right? If he was going to play wide receiver, you're talking about a top 3 wide receiver in this class, in my opinion. Some people would have him as the wide receiver 1, but dominant in terms of contested catch. If he goes to a team like New England, or maybe goes to a team, I don't know, like maybe the Browns too, I wouldn't mind drafting him, because those teams are likely going to be set at the cornerback position, and he's likely going to play wide receiver if he gets selected to those teams, right? I would love to see him paired up with Drake May. Joe Flacco just got signed to the Browns, so maybe we see him air it out, and he'd be co-partnering with Jerry Jeudy there. But I think Travis Hunter is a kind of a wild card here, but I'm willing to take the chance on him at the 203 if he fell here. And you swing and miss because he does maybe become a corner, and maybe you make that mistake and you're drafting before we get more insight to that. I'm fine missing here at the 203 because it was a good shot to take. But until I see more information, I can't value him, in the first round or very high in the first round. I just need that more information. At the 204, we have one of my guys. It's going to be RJ Harvey, running back out of UCF. Probably just my favorite running back in this class. Not my RB1 necessarily, but just a really fun player to watch on film. Really twitchy, strong lateral quickness, especially in tight spaces. And I think he could be that Bucky Irving of this class, right? Not a huge player, right? Had some strong production in college, but, size concerns. Can he hold up in pass pro? Like, these are things to worry about with RJ Harvey, and likely not going to be a 3-down back based on his size. But he fits the modern NFL offense where, he can be a nice complement to maybe a guy that's going to be more of a banger in an offense where he can be a PPR machine. And I do think he can run very well in between the tackles. He reminds me a little bit of Maurice Jones-Drew with his size and contact balance. Their athletic profiles are very similar in that regard. Like I said, could be a very strong PPR running back. And he had 22 touchdowns, which was the 3rd most in college football last season. 69 forced missed tackles, which was good enough for 8th in college football. And draft capital is going to be huge with him, right? If he goes day 3 and doesn't get day 2 or higher, definitely not going round 1. But if he gets day 2 capital, that's going to be big. If he goes into the day 3, you're likely looking at him probably settling in around the back end of the second, in that turn to the 3rd round. And I'd still be pretty excited to draft him because I really love the athletic profile. I love the skill set. He's got really good hands as well. And I think he could be a really strong contributor in PPR formats for fantasy football, especially in Dynasty. At the 205, we have another my guy. It's going to be Jaden Higgins, right, out of Iowa State. I was very high on this guy, even pre-combine. Love what I saw from him at the Senior Bowl. And, I mean, this is a guy who's likely going to get day two capital, pretty high day two capital as well. And for his size at 6'4", dudes that size should not be able to run a 4.47. 40 times matter more for the wide receiver position, in my opinion, than running back because they are running a lot more straight line. But at 6'4", to be able to move at that size is just absolutely absurd. He has the twitchiness to be like a slot receiver, but he also has an X receiver frame. So that excites me if if he gets himself in an offense where they're going to run a lot of power slot, right? That's that new fun thing that a lot of offenses are running these days. And he reminds me a little bit of Nico Collins as well. He's got elite hands, a 2.2% drop rate. And I would really not mind him going to a team like the Packers. I know there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense, but I think he'd really be a nice weapon for Jordan Love, who is a gunslinger, right? He's a guy that'll throw the ball up and allow his receiver to, have a chance to make a play. And that's something that I think they're missing there. And I think he could be a really nice asset. And I love him here at the 205. At the 206, we're going to go with Trey Harris out of Ole Miss. It's another guy that's kind of risen through the process. A lot of people really like this guy, and some people are saying he should be a top second round, maybe even late first round pick, but likely going to get day two capital, which is huge. Breakout age of 20 years old, which is another check off the box for him. He commanded a 23.6% target share as a junior with Ole Miss, and strong speed, right? 4.54 40-yard dash. And 5.12 yards per route run is the number one yards per route run for a wide receiver with 34 or more targets in college football last year. And a great ball tracker, has really strong hands, and you can see a lot of his catches over the shoulder can track the ball very, very well. And I like him here at the 206 and excited to see where he goes. At the 207, I'm going to go with Devin Neal out of Kansas. Devin Neal is a guy who, I was really, really high on in the beginning of the process. I've kind of cooled off a little bit on him, but I think the 207 is pretty fair. He had back-to-back 1,200 rushing yard seasons and 17 or more touchdowns in those seasons. He had 35 10-yard rushes in 2024, 26 receptions for 266 yards, multiple Big 12 selections, good zone blocking scheme fit, and he also has slot versatility, right? He understands leverage for running routes, and there's a team that lined him up in the slot a decent amount of times last year in college, and he was a running back that was lined up in the slot at the top of college football in terms of the amount of slot routes run by a running back. It wasn't a ton, but he was still lined up there a decent amount, which shows that versatility as a pass catcher. My concerns with him is the size a little bit, and I'm just not sure how high he's going to go. There's a chance he doesn't get day two capital, and day three capital, I think it's fair to have him somewhere at the 207 because he's not going to have that day two capital, right? And that's important when you're talking about a team's investment in a player and how much time that player is going to have to make an impact on a roster to stick with them long term, as well as the opportunity that they're going to be given. Usually depends on the draft capital that is invested in the player. So he's going to be here for me at 207. Now, the next player I'm going to go with is going to be Mason Taylor here at the 208. Mason Taylor, if you recognize the name, right, Hall of Fame father, Hall of Fame uncle in terms of NFL players. So he has that bloodline. He was a true freshman starter at LSU, which I think is super important to keep in mind. I think he's going to get mid to high day two capital. And this is a good all-around player when you look at Mason Taylor's film. He's kind of like Emeka Egbuka, where I said he's very good at pretty much everything, but not necessarily elite at anything. I think Ibuka has some elite traits, but Mason Taylor doesn't really have anything that he does that you look at and say, wow, he's elite at that specifically. But he's going to be on the field in pretty much all packages, which is a plus at the tight end position. If a guy that can block well and also can be lined out to catch as a receiver, he's got good yards after catch ability. And again, it's hard to ignore that bloodline. And he comes from a big school, and being a guy that was a true freshman, right, and played at a big time program is a big plus for me in my rankings. So I'm going to take him here at the 208. At the 209, we're going to go with Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe. He's a guy that has a huge arm, right? That is not a concern. Big arm, can throw the ball hard and strong, but he's got some accuracy issues, which is a concern for me. Also, how high in the draft does he go, right? You look at Jalen Milroe, and he did get an invite to go and show up for the first round of the NFL draft. So there is some smoke that he could go in the first round. I'm not buying that smoke. I don't think he will, but if a team wants that fifth-year option, it wouldn't be that surprising to trade back in to the end of the first round and draft him there so they can get that fifth-year option if they really do believe in the guy. But when you think about Milroe, he's got good upside with the legs, and he's got a strong arm. He's got to work on some stuff mechanically, but round one capital has to push him up. And look, if he gets drafted in the first round, I could see him going higher than the 209. But as it stands today, I'm not buying that Jalen Milroe is going to be a first round quarterback. So that's why I have him here at the 209. But I do think a team is going to invest a decent day two pick on him, and we'll see how it goes. At the 210, we are going to go with Cam Skattebo. Yep, Cam Skattebo out of Arizona. Cam Skattebo reminds me of James Conner in some ways, where he's a good pass catcher. He's not super fast, not super quick, but knows his leverage as a receiver. I mean, this is a guy that caught a lot of passes in 2024, 45 receptions. He was second in terms of forced missed tackles behind Ashton Jeanty, who had, Skattebo had 103 in 2024. I feel like people's evaluations on Skattebo are kind of all over the place, but he did impress at the scouting combine, where he had an 89th percentile burst score, and he's got elite hands, right? This is a guy that can catch the football. This is a case of a guy who is the fantasy community rating him too high compared to what the actual NFL thinks of him, or is it the opposite? I mean, I've seen some people who don't even have him in the first two rounds of their rookie drafts, and I think you got to have him at least in the first two rounds. I think this is fair. It's not too high at the 210, but it's a solid risk on a guy who has shown that he can be a pass catcher, at least in the NFL, and he can be a good running back in the NFL. I mean, the speed is a concern. I totally get that, and that's why I don't have him any higher, but when you look at his statistics from 2024, it's crazy to think that a guy like that is going to be going this far in the rookie draft, but the speed is a concern, right? And so I like taking Cam Skattebo here at the 210. He reminds me of James Conner a little bit, but he also reminds me of, like, is he going to be that running back that when he gets to the NFL, in fantasy football, people are going to shy away from drafting him, and he's always going to overperform, and people are always going to say, I don't want to draft this guy. That's how it feels like with, like, a guy like James Conner, ironically, who I'm making the comp to, right? Like, where every year nobody wants to draft James Conner, but he ends up getting into the end zone 8 to 10 times and ends up being a solid RB2 to a mid RB2, right? So I like Cam Skattebo here at the 210. I don't think it's too high. I think it's a good spot for him, and that's where we're going to go. At the 211, we're going to go with Alec Ayumanor out of Stanford. This is a guy who I wasn't super high on, but I've started to grow a little more interested in him as the process continues. You're in a 4.47 40-yard dash at the combine, and at his size, 6'2", 206, that's a really good time, and it's really impressive. He had a 40.1% college dominator rating, and I believe he's going to get mid to late day two draft capital is what I'm expecting. He wins contested catches and vertical routes, and he's a smooth mover with good body control and burst. And again, a guy at that size with that kind of speed, it's just, it's hard to ignore it. I think I talked about the Packers before. I think this would be a good landing spot too, right? 6'2", reminds you of a prototypical, possibly X wide receiver. And I think he would be a really good landing spot for him. And so I'm going to take him here at the 211. Now, with the last player here, it's going to be a little bit more of a polarizing player. The last pick in the second round, I'm going to go with Ollie Gordon. Look, there are a lot of people that are not very high on Ollie Gordon. I get it. He had a down year in 2024, but when you look at least what he did in 2023, how do you ignore that, right? He was a Doak Walker Award winner, which, if you're not familiar with that, is the nation's top running back, right? Ollie Gordon, if he was to, declare and was able to go into the NFL draft last year, there's a good chance he's the number one running back off the board in a weak fantasy football draft class. And he rushed for 1,732 yards in that 2023 season. He showed everything that I need to see, and he was doing that behind the 95th ranked run blocking offense. He found himself in a really bad offense this year, and a team that did not win many games. And I think a lot of that contributed to his, down year and not really much success, right? The team turned the ball over a lot, didn't have as many opportunities, and it just wasn't a great situation for Ollie Gordon. But this is just a classic case of, I'm just going to bank on the talent, right? This is a guy, they don't just give out the award for the nation's best running back to anybody, right? He showed us his apex, his peak. And let's just hope that he can continue to be that guy when he gets to the NFL level. I think it's also a case of, this is a guy who packed on some weight last year and maybe needs to shed a few pounds to maybe help him out as he gets to the next level. But that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.